Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we're discussing my thoughts on episode 9 of the anime series Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu Descending Stories. And man, we're talking once again the story coming full circle in so many different ways. You know, beginning us off in the bathhouse, of course. I love the enthusiasm of Yotaro and Shin catching effectively Yakumo in a little bit of a lie. The idea of his wanting to die performing Rakugo, but how can he do that if he's no longer performing it? You know, they catch him. For all intents and purposes, look, you have to get back to this in some way, shape, or form. And we did see in the previous episode he was making the attempt before the big boss man himself got picked up by the police, and we find out he's got 6 years ahead of him in pretty hard incarceration time. And I thought it was really interesting, as we see, you know, one of my sort of fears was that Yotaro was actually back in prison based on the PV that showed us glimpses of this episode attached to the previous. And luckily that was one of my speculations, that it was actually just flashbacks to his time in prison. But it comes full circle in the effect that, you know, it was Yakumo's performing Rakugo while Yotaro was in prison that really sparked that creative urge for him to follow this as a passion, and what got that snowball rolling effectively for him. And it's something that Yotaro aspires to leave behind in his going in and, you know, doing prison performances. Even this day and age, he wants to inspire people and give them hope. And, you know, even if they are of the criminal element, I mean, someone like him, he was a fall guy, so we don't really know how far down the rabbit hole of criminal activities he had actually gotten. Maybe nothing. Maybe it was his first day on the job and he took the fall and he did time for, you know, the boss and everything like that. It's hard really to know, but he's sympathetic toward all the lives that are in prison, whether wrongfully so or there for good reason. And he wants to give them something to hold on to. He wants to entertain them, wants to bring them some kind of creative light that he himself was exposed to through Yakumo. And I absolutely love that. But I love the fact that they catch him in this lie, this idea that, you know, you can't be dying and leaving Rakugo behind, but also be taking it with you, but you want to die while you're performing it, but you've quit for all intents and purposes because of your health ailments. He was going to give it, you know, sort of the old college try in the previous episode, but it didn't amount to anything. And I love how both of these lines sort of cross together in the idea that, well, now Yotaro has talked Yakumo into doing a prison performance of his own. And I'm not sure if we actually saw the boss in the crowd. They showed a lot of people, and I was more transfixed by the performance and the way, you know, everyone looked really grumpily at Yakumo, like, why are we wasting our time with this? And then as the performance went on, it was a very powerful performance, and it was one they could all relate to, being confined and not being able to be with the person you love and losing them over time because you can't escape, you can't break free. And just so much of the elements of your life are not at your command anymore, not under your control. And a lot of these men in this, you know, particular prison environment, that's the rest of their lives. You know, say what you want about the inner workings of being in prison and living that lifestyle. Every single person in there is a human being on some level and is going to be aspiring towards something or wishing for something or missing someone. And these are the base elements that, you know, this Rakugo performance basically touches upon, and you see the emotions flood over the entire crowd. Even the guards are starting to get misty-eyed by the end, you know, experiencing this tale about this guy who spent and wasted all his money and got himself sort of incarcerated. You know, I don't know if it's metaphorical that it was both sort of a sort of self-imposed imprisoning, as well as actually a fitting punishment to somebody who spent beyond their stipend, beyond their savings, and could no longer foot the bill and everything like that. And they lost the heart of this geisha woman, according to this story, and she would eventually die, having written letters like almost every day for so many days, for like the first 80, I think they said, of this person's incarceration in the story. And, you know, eventually it was something when he finally was released back out into the world, he had to sort of confront the loss of this person who was pretty much the only person who gave any care or concern for him. And you know, it seems very touching and fitting, that particular story framework, to be portrayed in front of all these prisoners. It's something that will get them really riled up and emotional. I was almost afraid. There was one guy who started like shaking. You know, like I was afraid, are they going to bum rush the stage, or is something really bad going to happen? But it was really affecting them to their emotional core, and it was sort of pleasantly surprising for that very bittersweet that Yakumo, even at this aged point in his life where he feels like he's lost something, he feels like he's lost that ability to be such an effective performer, and here he is moving an entire crowd to tears. And as I'm listening to it, as I'm watching it, as I'm watching the animated performance, and I'm listening to that voice, I'm just transfixed. I'm compelled by it. You know, the voice actor who has voiced Yakumo all the way back since season 1, I mean, for him to have grown and evolved the way he portrays the character, especially now in his old age, it's just amazing to me. Like, I thoroughly believe and am invested in that voice caricature, if you will, that performance. And the idea that so much of Yakumo's life is rounding out toward its end. There's a very sort of, you know, over the top, putting that forth in this episode, that sensation that by the end of this episode, maybe we will finally have seen Yakumo pass away. It seems like he's really sort of cutting off all ties, and he's in denial about something we've heard him speak before, but this want to live on. There's a point of conflict where he's trying to adhere to his former statements of wanting to die and take Rakugo with him. He wants to die on stage. He wants to die in the middle of performance. It's kind of an evolved version of that thing he said once before. But then when confronted with his own mortality, suffering the heart attack, and Konatsu, you know, clamping onto him and saying, no, you can't do this to me. You can't leave me like my parents did, and I don't want to lose you, and I love you. And he understands all the people around him wouldn't let him die willingly. You know, that enthusiasm, again, talking about Yotaro and Shin at the start of the episode, he understands there are so many people who want him to live on, but there's a loss of hope that he needs to come to terms with and realize, even though he's telling this to himself, even though he's telling this to everyone, he really doesn't want to die yet. He's not ready to let go yet. There's so much of his life, so much of his past, so much of what he's gone through, his history, the people he's lost, the people who are still in his life, that mean more to him than his own death, which used to take up so much of his focus. The idea of his time coming to an end used to be his sole purpose, almost, and his sole focus. And so to see him go back to this performance house in Mangetsu, and the sort of, you know, little gopher guy, you know, he orders them, set things up, close up shop, you know, I'm going to go home ahead of me, I'm going to stay behind, and he's going to put on the Shinigami performance, which is going to answer to something he spoke about previously, about wanting to reach the god of performance, the spirit of performance. And I knew as soon as I saw the OP with, you know, Sukeroku having the red eyes, once again, the red pupils, I knew he was going to be making an appearance. And we already have sort of the precursor of that in his former performance in the episode, where, of course, Konatsu begins singing the verses during the song when you know, this cat who had been incarcerated was finally sort of reunited with the spirit of his lost love. And the visual, the imaginings of Yakumo at that point are of Miyokichi, and even the voice being sung, the way the melody is coming out, it's the embodiment of Miyokichi. I believe it is Yotaro who's like kind of looking at her gape, like that's Miyokichi's voice, you know, or someone at least recognizes that fact. And so his entire envisioning of almost kind of saying goodbye to her and putting her to bed once and for all, that aspect of his still lingering and holding on to her, and you know, thinking she still holds some tie over him, some claim over him and his life and his choices. a lot of the things he's motivated to think and do and say are it's coming to that culmination where finally, again, it feels like the rounding out of Yakumo's life, and it will be done by the end of this episode. And so when he has that alone time where he's putting on the Shinigami performance, I knew Sukeroku was going to appear at some point. And at first, he's very much the Sukeroku of old, and there's the playful banter between them about his performing style, and that he lost his audience because he lost his voice. There's the playful ribbing as it would be in the old days. But then the Sukeroku that is manifest takes on such a dark turn in becoming that skeletal, almost demonic, god of performance as Yakumo sort of assumes him to be. And at once he's having a vision of the entire place burning down. It's part of the story of the candle flame and trying to switch the flame from one candle to the other to preserve one's life, and leaving a sort of, history behind oneself of a very sort of lascivious life, and a very, condescending and demeaning life, and wanting to actually make one better in hopefully being reborn, or having the chance to live their life anew, and all this stuff. It's all parallels to what, Yakumo has experienced and what he's experiencing in the moment. He's very much dancing on the candle flame of not wanting to die, of being faced and confronted with the fact that no matter how much focus he has put on the idea of his death, of the death of Rakugo, passing away with him, he's been in denial that it's very much the opposite. The opposite is true. He has too much to hold on to. And so those flames, I was actually kind of shocked, but I was perceiving this was what was happening as it was happening, but I was no less shocked for it, that a candle was thrown into the seating, which was, of course, empty. It's an empty theater, and those flames become real, and the entire place is burning down. And were it not for Yotaro, whether he was just passing by, whether he knew where Yakumo was and he was going to check up on him, he gets there in the nick of time and rescues, saves Yakumo's life. And I think the most paramount and moving and effectual part of that is Yakumo on that stage, cast prone as he was, with this spirit of performance, this demonic, force, this presence trying to bring him to his end in a very bitter fashion. Were it not for all of those things coinciding, we would not have seen the vulnerable side of Yakumo once again coming to the fore, rearing its head and having him beg and plead for Yotaro, save me, please save my life. I don't want to die. And it was just, again, the breath was caught in my throat the entire time. I'm just sitting there, I'm like, and it just, wow. I mean, that's all I can really say. I'm kind of so dumbstruck and awed by it. This series never fails, never ceases to bring me right to the edge of all that, groundswell of emotion, and then it can gobsmack me even to this late date in the series, and with just mere episodes to go. Of course, I wonder where it will go. I wonder still if Yakumo will survive to the end of the series. I'm glad that Yotaro did not end up back in prison, and there wasn't anything like that. His life continues, his success continues. And there's a great sort of touchstone to that effect when Yakumo had gone in to witness Inokori, the performance Sukeroku or Yotaro was putting on. And he was, of course, still disappointed in it. He's still a stickler for his own style, and he's not very happy with Yotaro's style and everything like that. But Higuchi is there and realizes, after having his attention called to the fact that Yakumo is actually witnessing this, he's sitting in on some of the performance. When he goes to leave early, Higuchi follows after him. And it was just, it didn't need to be spelled out if you've been watching the series, but the idea that he goes to give Higuchi the fan, what I believe to be the Sukeroku fan, the fan that he has used and Konatsu has charged him with using as a good luck charm of sorts, something that very much encapsulates his past and the past dealings with Sukeroku of old and Myokichi and all that stuff, his entire history with Konatsu. All of that is embodied in this one artifact, you know. And he gives it to Higuchi, saying, "Give it to the dunce. Give it, give it to Yotaro. He'll know what it means. Even if I'm resigned to the fact that he'll never be any better than I want him to be, than my own expectations. He's doing things his own way. More power to him. Give him this." And I hope that wasn't something that happened off screen, you know. Like, I don't know if he was given that and then that's what led Yotaro to come seeking out Yakumo, and that's what inevitably made him save his life and be there in the nick of time. I kind of hope we get that moment, because I love, again, as I started the video by saying, I love the enthusiasm of Yotaro and dealing with Yakumo and dealing with this art form, this craft that is Rakugo, passing it on to the next generation, much as it was passed on to him in Shin from the Yakumo and everything like that, from the Sukeroku of old. He would know exactly what that fan represents, and it would just be, I would almost imagine half of an episode entirely would be him screaming and dancing and hugging everyone to have received that. And I really want that to be something we get to see, especially in the aftermath of where this episode leaves us, with just another chapter in the history of these characters' lives, in the history of this fictional interpretation of Rakugo, coming to a close, and yet with each closed door, another is opened anew. And I can't wait to see where we go from here. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you've seen episode 9 of Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, Descending Stories. If you enjoyed it, if you were as gobsmacked and you know, just succumbing to the emotion as I was, and all that good stuff. Love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. And so yeah, otherwise it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.